G'day. Scorn is an interesting game, both in good and bad ways. After a lengthy time in development and funding issues, I truly am glad this game got to see the light of day, so don't get me wrong in that regard. Unfortunately, there are issues, and I don't just mean some aspects I didn't like about it. In some ways, the game is very much incomplete even after 8 years of development, but it's also a chore to play at times due to some really clunky combat which I personally think drags the overall experience down. Firstly, I'll cover the story side of the game. I've seen some people compare the vagueness of this game to the likes of Dark Souls when that simply isn't the case. Scorn is not just vague, it completely refuses to give you any information outside of various themes and small amounts of storytelling that I figured was supposed to be interpreted in a metaphorical sense and not have a straight answer at all. I'll say now though, I don't consider myself a terribly intelligent person, average at best maybe. I was the kid in school who, when the teacher read a line from a book about how a red piece of clothing symbolized aggression and sexuality or something, I would sit there and go, "What? Where the fuck does it say that?" So for this game, I did my best to interpret what I could, and I figured that the developers maybe had a specific story in mind when they wrote it out, but the idea was to not be informative and allow complete freedom of interpretation for the players. I had three main ideas that I pondered. The first relates to the fact that this very much looks like Alien, and Alien, like Scorn, takes inspiration from H.R. Giger's work, and because those art styles and Alien's undertones are sexual of nature, Alien specifically covers themes of rape and impregnation, I was in the mindset that Scorn was trying to do something similar. So instead of rape, impregnation, and birth, what I was interpreting was this was a game about sex, pregnancy, and miscarriage. There's a lot of hinting at cycles of life and the act itself of being born, and right at the end of the game, you're stopped from being carried to your birth, or at least that's how I saw it. The pregnant mother figure, literally carrying you in her arms, can do nothing as you reach out for help and beg to be allowed to be born into the real world. My second thought was that it was all just about the human body transcending flesh, or rather the human mind transcending its flesh and taking on some sort of either higher consciousness or achieving something higher in another dimension or something related to that. And the final thing that I thought the game was about was maybe this was meant to be a Giger-inspired version of the Divine Comedy, and this was hell or one of the levels of hell or circles of hell, and you were trying to traverse your way through and make your way to the proper afterlife or something. Annoyingly though, there is a whole lot of story that is not told to the player in any meaningful way because the developers simply didn't put it in. The art book is proof of this. Entire levels are mentioned, along with the fact that this is an actual world that was inhabited and lived in by people or civilizations. We're just walking through it as it's on its last legs, crumbling into nothing. Sure, there are still themes and metaphors, that much is mentioned by the devs themselves in the art book, but there is also an entire narrative and events that have happened, such as a war between two different factions, which we never learn anything about in the vanilla game that we received. The environmental storytelling doesn't really work due to the fact there are very few areas that actually provide some form of narrative insight. And even then, it's still a stupid amount of guesswork due to the content that didn't make it into the game. Without the art book, one could just assume there are random allegories or metaphors scattered throughout, and it's your meaning that you take that is the true story. With it though, the devs have told us there is a story. It was just never put into the game. And I'm all for having these things be open-ended or up to a person's own interpretation, but this game is very clearly not finished. After so many years waiting, we finally get to play the game, and not only is the main narrative not included, but what narrative is there only exists in small sections with no context or real information given, and that was a big letdown for me. The shitty combat was also a letdown, but that's another story. Secondly, I want to cover the advertising and marketing from the devs themselves. Ebb Software was clear that this was never meant to be a shooter or anything, and I do think some people let their imaginations get the better of them when watching the trailers, but there is still some outright incorrect material from the devs themselves, and we don't have to look any further than the store on the Steam page. You will explore interconnected regions in a non-linear fashion. The game is severely linear. There is only one path to take. There is only one ending. The only time the game isn't linear is at the beginning, where you can choose between two options that still leads to you progressing through the same door regardless of your choice. And at some points you're able to enter a room that you don't have to be in straight away, but you can't do anything in that room because you're supposed to come back later to progress. Outer Wilds is non-linear. Scorn is not. You will open up new areas, acquire different skill sets, weapons, various items. There are no skill sets at all. You get 3 weapons, with a 4th being usable for the final section of the game, an item for healing and holding your ammo, and then the only other items you pick up are related to unlocking doors to get to the next area. Each region is a maze-like structure with various rooms and paths to discover. As I said before, the game is severely linear. There are no areas that offer multiple rooms to discover or twisted hallways to get lost in. It's as straightforward as these types of games come. Last one I'll go over is different playstyles will be needed to advance. I'd like to know what the devs are talking about when they say playstyles, because all I can think of are the very few moments in the game where you're able to either fight the enemy that's in front of you or run away from them. You don't necessarily have to kill some of the enemies to progress to the next section. That's not varying playstyles though. It's a binary choice akin to saying a stealthy option in a game versus a loud option is a choice of ethics and morality. It's fucking loud or quiet, it's not that deep. And neither are the options available to you as a player in Scorn. I really fucking badly want Ebb Software to make more games, and I would love to see more done in this universe, specifically with this incredible art design. There is so much talent that was involved in making this game, but it seems like maybe they got bogged down at certain points and weren't sure whether or not they should include typical gameplay elements to ensure players didn't lose interest early on or anything. That's what I think when I look at the painful combat in particular. Maybe they felt like they had to add some of these things because that's what other games do. But this game was going to be niche either way. It looks like nothing else that's come before it. And I really wish they had just made a dedicated walking simulator, and wish we could have had gotten the cut levels that contain properly delivered story elements about the world, and maybe even had a game that was a little bit bigger in terms of exploration, more open. Would have been nice if we could have maybe just freely explored a little, even if the areas that we could explore had nothing to do with the main narrative. It would have just helped with that environmental storytelling if there were more areas of interest, so to speak. I'll definitely be watching with a keen eye, and I hope others do experience this game either on sale, through Game Pass, or just watch a playthrough if you don't want to pay full price for it, because it is definitely worth seeing for yourself. It is really fucking cool in a lot of ways. And look, kudos to the devs for finally getting this one out after so many years. And until the next video, have a good one.